something that I call the magnetic talk formula. And it works in a talk, but it also works when you're on podcasts, you're doing any kind of PR, whenever you're showing up on video or even conversations. There's really 4 factors that you should constantly be thinking about. And that's how you actually get results from your talk. So when I say magnetic, I mean, you show up on stage and you're so confident you're attracting your ideal clients, whether or not you're pitching. That is the goal for entrepreneurs. We're not just there to inform, we're there to ignite action.
Yay, welcome back to the show. I am so excited to have my personal friend and just overall badass woman, Heather Sager, onto the show. Now, she is many things. She's a mom, she's a friend, but most importantly, I really call her the expert speaking maverick. So what she does is help entrepreneurs and businesses master their talk. How do you communicate your business? How do you really captivate the attention of someone with confidence? So today we're going to dive into it. Welcome to the show, Heather.
Hi, Gloria. I'm super thrilled to be here.
So I have so much admiration for you. When I met you in Phoenix at a mastermind, I could just tell that this woman was living in her zone of genius. And so when you gave a presentation about your formula for speaking, I was just in awe. And I said, I needed to have you on the show. So here we go. My first question to you is, you said something that really resonated with me was, everyone has a signature talk in them. Now, for a lot of people, they may not think they are either worthy to have a signature talk, or they might not be as big as some of the clients you've worked with who you helped get onto, the speaking stages such as Davos and TEDx or TED. So what do you have to say to everyone? Why do we all need to even consider having a signature talk?
Well, as business owners, the thing that we have to keep in mind is we want to be known for something, right? Every single one of us has something that we do, ideally something that we sell. And when we want to be viewed as the best or the best person for the job to help our people, we have to be known for something. And the struggle with a lot of entrepreneurs is with their multi-passionate or desire to help so many people, we find ourselves talking about a lot of different things. The challenge with this is when we talk about a lot of different things in our business, whether it's on stage or on social or on our emails or newsletters or whatever else, we're creating a script for our audience that they don't know quite how to follow it. So when we start honing down our message, our unique stories, our unique point of view, how we talk about our expertise in a way that gives our clients and our audience a script for how to talk about us, how to reference us, how to refer us to other people, we make it easier for people to do business with us. So even if we don't feel like we have a big story or we have this big, compelling, unique idea, every one of us has a duty to have some kind of signature messaging so that our audiences know how to talk to us or about us, and we can be more successful in what we do.
Now, you and I both know that, especially here on this podcast, everything is messaging, right? But can you clarify for us, what is the difference between, let's say, copywriting or just being a generally good writer? Like someone could say, well, I am a great writer because I wrote stuff at school. Like, how is that very different than the talk that you're talking about?
Okay, so let's kind of define the word of messaging. So there's this thing called delivering a message, and that is anything that you have to share in whatever vehicle that is. So that could be with your voice, it could be with your written word, it could be with your visuals. When you have a message, you have something to say. Messaging is all about the context you create with your message. So what I mean by that is, as business owners, when we deliver information about our offers, let's say we're pitching, let's say we're on a media outlet and we're talking about a specific topic, our messaging is the context we create around the thing we want to talk about. And context is so important because our audiences don't have the level of awareness that we do about what we teach. And a lot of times, you know that expression, you can't read the label from inside the jar? As experts, we think if we talk about things in a too basic of a way, that people will think that we're not smart or we're not dumb or we are dumb or we're idiots or that it's way too basic. But that's not actually true, as we actually have to simplify things and create context so that people can keep up with what we have to say. So messaging and talking in the way that I speak, it's all about how you frame out your expertise in language that your ideal customer understands, it resonates with them, and most importantly, it drives them into action.
Now, I mean, that is like, whoa, so much to unpack there. But why do you think business owners are so, I don't want to say bad at this, but why do you think that they it's not like a natural thing that they just are born with once they start a business.
I think we could probably say this with so many different things. For those of us who, I mean, we all have our expertise, right? And we're like, oh, why is it so easy for us and hard for others? When it comes to either crafting great messages or what I love is talking about just speaking in general, like your voice is your best brand asset in your business. So the better you can communicate, the better you can represent your brand. These things are not natural because we're not used to being the one holding the microphone. We're not used to being the spokesperson. We're not used to the quote unquote pressure of the spotlight or the stage. And we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to get it perfect. And that is a big deal. And it makes us go all fuddy-duddy and weird and forget what we're saying or have a moment of blackout and not know where we're going with our words. And then we wonder, what the hell did we say? So it's hard because there is that element of pressure that happens when you're in the spotlight. But more importantly, there's this thing, I don't know if you've ever heard before, can't remember the name of the original psychologist who came up with this concept, but it's called the curse of knowledge. And what the curse of knowledge states is it actually comes down to brain science. So when we learn specific things in our brain, we create these different neural pathways. And let's say the first time that you do something, for example, the first time you drive a car, you're like very aware of all the steps it takes to do something. So you remember, I don't know, I remember driving, getting in the car, like the feel of the door handle and sitting in the seat and clicking in the seat belt and trying to figure out which pedal was which the very first time you were in. You're aware of everything and everything feels like a lot of pressure. Well, fast forward, we get our licenses. We ride with our friends in cars for years. In our 20s, we're riding with the steering wheel under our knees with a Diet Coke in one hand and a breakfast sandwich in the other, racing to work. And as we get to that point, we no longer really think about all those little things with driving. We're not thinking about every subtle little thing. Okay, let's pivot back to the concept of the curse of knowledge. What happens is those neural pathways in our brain of that specific task or that skill, our brain, which learns to be super efficient, starts taking shortcuts. It no longer has to recognize, twist the keys forward to turn on the car. It no longer has to recognize, oh, rain. Now I need to turn on the windshield. So our brain actually eliminates those steps to preserve energy. And therefore, we're not even familiar with those steps anymore because our awareness is gone. It's now second nature. So coming back to messaging and talking about your expertise, the reason why experts struggle with it is because their brains have shortcutted their expertise, which makes it seem so obvious to them. They don't even know how to talk about it anymore because those obvious things seem so apparent.
So are you saying that one of the foundational things someone should master when it comes to maybe one day becoming as fluent as you in conversation is to kind of step back and simplify it a little bit more for our audience?
1000% is you want to simplify it. And this is also why it's really important to listen to the real questions that audiences are asking. I think a lot of times we want to come up with ideas for what we can teach or problems that we can solve for our audiences because we know them. But at the end of the day, a lot of times those things that we're listening to are 5 steps ahead of where they're at, or they're too complicated because we're trying to make them more quote unquote valuable. So simplifying things down to the basics, that's what the most successful businesses have figured out. So the more that you can lean into simplicity, you'll typically find the more scalable and successful you'll be.
Now, you have like so much experience in sales. And when we chatted, you told me you train like hundreds of sales reps. So can you draw the connection, the most critical connection of mastering this message and also sales? Because that's really what businesses are after, right? More sales. Yeah. How does it equate to more sales exactly?
Yeah. So this one is an interesting one because when I talk to most experts and entrepreneurs, they have no problem sitting in front of a potential client and getting to know them. We're really good at asking questions, and experts specifically, they want to know about the person in front of them. They want to know where they're challenged, why they're challenged. We get really curious and want to know information. For me, I saw this firsthand. My old career prior to starting my business, for 10 years, I worked at one of the top management firms in healthcare for private practice audiology doctors, which is a very, very specific niche. But all this to say, my job was helping doctors sell hearing aids to patients who needed them. Now, a little background for me, I wear hearing aids. I have a very substantial hearing loss, and I cannot function without these 2 little computers in my ears to be able to understand what other people are telling me. But with doctors, when they sit down in front of a patient, they want to know, let me measure your hearing. Let me actually see what your hearing loss is. Oh, I can help you. I have a solution. But the interesting thing about hearing specifically is there's a lot of emotion backed with people's ability to hear. The target demographic for this group was the older demographic. So people had a lot of negative associations with hearing loss, like, oh my gosh, I'm getting old. Oh my gosh, I'm nearing the end. It sounds very dramatic, but these were very real fears. And there was a lot of stigma around hearing aids. Now, I bring this up because part of my job was to teach doctors how to lead this conversation. And the ones who were the most successful were the ones who took the time to get to know their patients, to ask questions, to get context, meaning where was hearing or hearing loss showing up in their lives? How is it holding them back? How is it impacting their professional careers for those who were coming in with early stage hearing loss? Someone like me, when an audiologist took time to ask how my hearing loss was impacting my relationship with my husband, my potential future relationship with my kids. How is it holding me back in my job? When those conversations, when we start creating context, it starts making it easier to connect the dots for that client or patient in front of you on how the solution fits into their life. So let's transpose this over to most business owners. Is we're really good at having conversations, but we fail to make the connection between how that conversation relates to selling the solutions. So what we have to get good at is how do we create context when it's not a conversation, AKA it's one-sided, like a sales video, or you're writing copy for a sales page or a page on your site, or you're doing a webinar or whatever vehicle. If it's not two-way conversation, people struggle because it doesn't feel natural. But the other way is we have to start thinking about how our solutions apply to the context for the client in front of you. So the connection between those two things exists. That's why I'm so pro context, right? You always have to be creating context, but selling feels hard because a lot of people, they don't connect the two things around the reasons why somebody wants something and how their offers fit into it.
Ooh, that's so good. I think that's also something similar that I've noticed while helping our PR students like take off the marketing hat and say, it's really not about your unwritten autobiography or your resume. The way to draw people in is actually not by listing all of that, is by making a connection so that they really resonate. So I want to pivot a little bit because what I loved about meeting you and hearing your presentation is you have this framework. Of course, you have all the tools and strategies, but I really love your unique take on what someone needs to do in the first 5 minutes of a webinar, which actually you taught me how to do because we did a webinar audit, the 5 or 6 things you need to do to captivate your audience. So can we maybe talk a little bit about that and what people get wrong about starting a webinar or a video or a sales letter?
Yeah. Okay. I love that you're getting really like tactical with this. Let's geek out on this. So one of the things that has to happen in a talk, but also in conversations, if you want someone to stick with you. Let me give you a little example here. I want you to imagine that you're at a networking event. We've all been to them before. Some people love them. Some people hate them. To me, I'm not a huge fan of networking because I hate surface level small talk. One, it takes a lot of energy with my hearing. And two, like, why? So I want you to imagine though you're in a networking event. We all know how it goes. You walk up to someone you've never met before and you can gauge pretty quickly if you want to commit to this conversation or escape this conversation. And what happens in those first few seconds, first few minutes is something that I call the head nod effect. The head nod effect is essentially, are they saying things that you're nodding your head in agreement with? Are you picking up what they're putting down or vice versa? Are you in sync? And if you're not in sync, you're looking for the door, you're having your girlfriend text you so you can plan your escape. Like you are getting away from that conversation as fast as possible because we're too old to like commit to this little hustle of chit chat, right? We want to go have quality conversations. Well, the same thing happens in business when you're on a sales call, you're leading a webinar, you're delivering a presentation in any context. Your audience is sizing you up saying, is this going to be worth my time and energy? Or can I go to my phone and check out what's happening on social media or play Candy Crush? Or I don't know if Candy Crush is still cool, but I see ads sometimes. So we'll just use that example. But they're going to tune out if you haven't hooked them. So in your talk, you have to have specific elements that get them heading or head nodding. Now, what some of those are is within the first 5 minutes, they have to be able to say, oh yeah, that's me. That's my problem. They also have to be head nodding and saying, heck yeah, that is exactly what I want. They have to be head nodding at those two things, because the big mistake that so many people make in their presentations is they start by making it about them, about their credibility, about why that person should listen. And we do that by backing up with our credentials or name dropping our experience. And while we do need to bring credibility, because that is one of the head nods of this is the person to work with, in the first 5 minutes of your webinar or your talk, if you're making it about yourself, that is instant head shake. And they are going, how do I get out of this? And you're making the battle to get their attention back even higher. So you want to make it about them. Hey, that's me. They get me. That's my problem. And that is what I want. It has to happen in the first 5 minutes of your talk. Otherwise, you lose them.
Ooh, I love that so much, because if you look at all the talks that have the most, like 20 million views, right? Like let's say on TED, because I know you work with a lot of clients to help them get their TED Talks. They're not really talking about their credentials, right? They're either using a story or an example where everyone's like nodding. So do you have an actual example of how this would actually play out, of when it worked really well?
So what it determines on the type of talk. So I don't actually do a lot of TED Talks for people. Most of the talks that I coach business owners on are stage opportunities that lead to clients in their business. So my special expertise is helping business owners leverage speaking as a marketing tool to capture more leads, more clients, and raise their authority. So most of the talks that my clients are doing is they're speaking at conferences. They're speaking at association events. They're guest speaking on influencer stages. Maybe they're leading webinars. They're hosting their own events. But the goal is that time I spend on stage is actually delivering off stage. So more leads, more sales, more clients, more authority, more clout, all those things. So I usually mention when you start a talk, you can start it in one of two ways. One way is you can very quickly engage your audience and make it about them, whether that's questions, whether that's a hypothetical scenario that you can pull people in. What you want to do is just get a head nod. So people are like, yeah, this is what's going on here. So I'll start a lot of my webinars with a couple questions. All my guest masterclasses that I do, there's some questions that I ask people. But my favorite way to start a talk is with what I call a sparkly story. And what a sparkly story is a story that you get the lean in effect from your audience, where you hook them in and they're like intrigued, right? Because the story is good. You have to be a great storyteller. But there's this element to the story that seems seemingly unrelated to the topic you're supposed to be talking about. And this thing that happens where they're like waiting for it. And then all of a sudden the connection happens and it becomes so clear. And they're like, yes, they resonate. Like I felt that way before. Yes, I've totally had that kind of feeling. Even if the experience is not the same, if they can identify with the feelings in the story, that's where you get, yeah, they're like me. They get me. Yeah, that is how I felt. Maybe my situation's not the same, but I resonate and I feel like this person gets it. So storytelling is one of the most powerful ways you can connect with your audience, but you have to ensure your story is for the benefit of your audience, not just trying to make you sound good or sound smart or sound funny. We have to make sure the orientation of why we're telling the story has a payoff for them.
Ooh, so many things come to mind when I think about my masterclass. Is, you know how I tell the story about when I came back from my Burning Man wedding and my Facebook ads account was shut down and my heart dropped because I was like, how am I ever going to get back, my account? Maybe that's a good story. Maybe I should start my PR masterclass with that to illustrate.
It's great. It's a great story. Where you have it tucked in is good. With a webinar is a different beast, right? A webinar has a very specific cadence where you have to start it a certain way, where you're addressing the reason why they're there, the promise that you have for that specific training. If you don't actually deliver on that right away and acknowledge that, they're not going to stick around. If you start with a story on a webinar, you're going to lose people because most likely it's a cold audience coming to you, especially those of you who do ads, or you get your traffic sources from people that don't necessarily know you, or it's not a direct referral. They're going, is this worth my time? And typically on a virtual presentation with cold traffic, if you start with a story, they're going to have that like, where's this going? Is this worth my time? So how you start your webinar, you engage them directly with why they're there, what they're there to learn, what their problem is, what they're wanting, what they're not wanting, and then you hook them in a story. You've established the head nod where they're going, yeah, this is worth my time. Yep, this is what I want. And then your story specifically, bringing in that interesting element of, what's the name of it? I want to keep saying Iron Man. Burning
Burning Man.
Man, Burning Man, bringing in that element brings this level of curiosity. And we think like, oh my gosh, Gloria's cool. Like, you're so much cooler than me. I'm like, oh, I don't even know what Burning Man is, but I feel like I should if I want to keep up with the cool kids, right? There's an interesting element that makes it unique. And then there's a shared connection where they might not have had their ads shut down, but they probably know someone, or they have the fear of that happening and they can have empathy. And they're like, oh yeah, I resonate as a business owner, not having control over how I generate leads. That is a terrifying feeling. So there's that shared connection, even if they don't have that experience. So that is a very strategic and well-told story. Do not move it. It's perfect.
If anyone's listening that has like a webinar, I highly, highly recommend you. And by the way, I'm not like an affiliate. I'm just a very happy customer and friend. Definitely get your webinar audited by Heather because it's incredible. I want to move to a couple of things. Let's just use me as a case study, right? Because I have my what you would call conversation clutches, where you watch my webinar and you say that there's some words that I say that either distract from my message or just are unnecessary. So can you tell me like the common things that people add into their talk that is unnecessary and they should look out for?
Yeah, let's talk about where this happens and the reason behind it, and then people can figure out where their filler words are. So filler words, whether they're us, those are the most common ones, right? Or likes, and so is a big one that people do not catch all the time. And so now saying and so is not a bad thing, but when you're using it in between every sentence in your video or webinar, you're creating the longest connective sentence under the sun. We have to be mindful of, are we pausing in between our thoughts, or are we just constantly filling the dead air because we don't want other people to think we're dumb or that they're going to fall off, right? So filler words, we have to be aware of what they are. They can be a lot of different things. It really just depends. Now, one thing I'll say is filler words are not a bad thing. So the goal isn't to eliminate the us and the ums. In fact, if you go back and listen to this recording or pay attention moving forward, I use filler words. They just don't undermine my message. When filler words overpower your content, people have this perception of you don't quite know what you're talking about. You aren't as confident or as sure, because filler words bring in a factor of insecurity. Whether or not you're consciously insecure or not, your mind to your mouth connection is communicating that you're not fully confident in what you're saying. So as an expert, we have to figure out how are filler words eroding our credibility, because that is a non-negotiable. Now, if you're a person who uses a lot of filler words, you definitely have to fix it because it's a distraction. Some people are really anal and they'll like notice all your filler words. And those kind of clients, I'm not really a fan of. People are like, you say like all the time. We don't need to pay attention to that kind of feedback. But overall, if you want to elevate your brand, get rid of your filler words. But the thing that I want to point to is the reason why we use filler words. The reason why we use filler words. So in this here is filler words typically happen. I see it in one of two places. There's probably more, but these are the two main ones that I fix all the time. For a sales-based conversation, people freak out when they're talking about something that they're not fully committed to or behind. So what I mean by that is if it's the first time you're making a sales pitch, or you're winding up to do a call to action that you're not fully you're feeling a little weird about, right? And it doesn't mean that you don't stand behind your offer, but you feel a little uncomfortable pitching yourself or your offer. So I see the most filler words happen in any kind of pitch or any kind of talking up yourself or talking up your programs. There's an inherent discomfort with that for experts and professionals. So you'll notice filler words go up because their comfort level has gone down. So pay attention there. That's why I recommend practicing your pitch is really important. Practicing talking yourself up, practicing, even if it's pitching a freebie at the end of a podcast episode. You'll hear me talk about that at the end of this podcast episode. Like how you talk about those things determines how confident people are in whatever it is you're offering. So that's one. But the second one, and I think this is what came up for you, Gloria, is in the transitions. This is where people fall off the rails a bit in two ways. They use filler words or they ramble. What I mean by transitions is when you're transitioning quite literally from slide to slide or from topic to topic or point to point or story to point, a lot of times people have mapped out what they want to say visually, but they haven't talked out how they're going to say it. And as experts, I'm not worried about what you're going to say when your content is on your slide. I'm more concerned around how you're connecting the dots between your stuff. Because remember how I said context is the most important thing that you can offer for your audience? Well, connecting your points is creating context for your audience. So if you don't know how to connect your points and you start using a lot of filler words or a lot of rambling, you're going to lose your credibility with your audience. So my mantra I always say with my clients is memorize the transitions and the pitch, familiarize yourself with your content. You already know that. You're going to rock it there. But what you have to watch is that in between, because that's where shit goes sideways.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to swear? I think I am.
It is so good. I hope people are taking notes, and you're going to need to come back to this episode because I think you just gave us like such a class on this in what, like 20 minutes? I mean, this is just invaluable. So definitely practice, but even more so, practice on the transitions and also practice on when you are pitching, because that is a naturally discomforting thing. So I love what you said that there. Anything else if somebody was thinking about sharpening their messaging skills, which by the way, I think everybody could raise their hand when I ask, like, do you want to be a better speaker? Everyone says yes. What are some of the other tools and strategies that you can give us?
Yeah. So one of my things I've been talking about for years is the formula in which I work with clients. It's something that I call the magnetic talk formula. And it works in a talk, but it also works when you're on podcasts, you're doing any kind of PR, whenever you're showing up on video or even conversations. There's really 4 factors that you should constantly be thinking about. And that's how you actually get results from your talk. So when I say magnetic, I mean, you show up on stage and you're so confident, you're attracting your ideal clients, whether or not you're pitching. That is the goal for entrepreneurs. We're not just there to inform, we're there to ignite action. Now, that action might be joining our list or buying our offers, or it might be following us online or just talking about us, but there's some kind of action required. And that's why the skills that we learned in Toastmasters or in college or that we acquired in corporate, they're great for presentations, but when you use speaking as an entrepreneur, you really have to focus on the skill of attracting leads and clients. And so the 4 things, I'll just run through them quickly. We've talked about a couple of them. Number 1, every time you open up your mouth to speak, you should know why you're speaking. There should be a strategy there. What is the goal for this? Am I trying to attract leads? Am I just here to build my confidence? Am I growing my authority? Am I trying to sell my offer? Like, there should be a specific reason. And there's a lot more behind that, but that's the simply put. Why am I here? What's my goal? The second piece of the formula is the structure. So this is what we've talked about a lot today, but there's actually a formula and a structure for how you put your message together. Now, I'm not the kind of trainer or coach where I teach people how to fill in the blank and say, like, map it out exactly this way. I think the most powerful way that you can speak is the way that your brain works, but we have to adjust how you talk about your expertise in a flow that's going to make it for your audience to understand. So structuring your talk, whether it's a signature talk or it's a video, I have a formula that we use for that, but knowing that there is a structure so that you do not get lost and you do not confuse your audience, critical to having a magnetic message. Number 3, we mentioned this earlier, but the power of storytelling. Specifically strategic storytelling. So if you want to be successful attracting people into your world, have them remember you, recognize you, and refer you, you have to tell damn good stories. And the 4th is you have to have really good style when you speak, meaning you have to sound like you. If you're trying to sound all buttoned up and polished, but you're real quirky and weird with your friends, it's not authentic. So people can sniff authenticity a mile away. It's a word that's talked about all the time. But what that means is, are you comfortable in your own skin? How you deliver that information, the facial expressions you make, the filler words you use, the uptick in your voice when you're not asking a question, the way that we communicate, the power that we have with our hand gestures and our tonality. All those things come together and they truly are the secret weapon that make you magnetic. But most people do not pay attention to how they speak or what they look like when they speak because they're all up in their head about everything else. But that really is the cincher for you showing up in a way that attracts the kind of people that you want to come into your world.
Oof. And this is really what the crux of what you're talking about, what I'm talking about is how do we get people into our world, right? Without having to force them. I mean, that's what the art of sales is. So you've talked about so much, both from an actionable, tactical thing, but then also the tonality. And that goes into a lot of things about mindset and self-worth. What is the next step that someone should take? Because there's obviously, we could be learning this for the rest of our lives, and we should be learning this for the rest of our lives.
So the most important thing for people to keep in mind is awareness for how you communicate will help you become a better communicator. So there's going to be a moment these next couple days after you're listening to this episode. Hopefully, you'll start noticing, what am I doing with my hands? Why is my face looking weird? And do I have a high pitched voice? Do I use filler words? You're going to second guess and you're going to wonder, okay, do I have a magnetic voice? What could I do to structure my message? You're going to get a little weird about it. And that's because we've broken down the fourth wall, if you will. I've given you kind of a peek of what it takes to become magnetic. All I want you to think about is start raising your level of awareness. Now, the simplest way you can do that is to record yourself on video and watch it back. Listen to it, transcribe it. Anything that you can actually physically see yourself back and remove that inner critic that you have a weird eyebrow like me. I have this left eyebrow that goes up all the time and I can't stop it. Or you have like weird hand gestures or, oh, why do I always say that? You have to remove that and shift into the role of, if you were a director in a movie, ideally you wouldn't crap on the talent. You would coach the talent. And you are the talent when you're shooting the video, but when you're watching the video, you have to step into the role of the director. And the director is going to say, what is required for this film? For you, you have to say, what's required for this brand? So that level of awareness of just paying attention in those categories I mentioned today, that is the first step, is raise your level of awareness and intention. And I mean, heck, if you want some support on that, I have like hundreds of podcast episodes dedicated to this exact topic. So if you like podcasts, like hop on over to my podcast. It's called Hint of Hustle with Heather Sager, and we can geek out on these things and I can guide you through some of these activities.
I love that so much. When you were talking about kind of watching yourself, which honestly, I don't know why it's so hard, but you know, kind of like when we were back in the 90s when we had our little voicemail. And I always would say, every time I recorded myself in a voicemail and played it back to me, I was so critical of my voice. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I sound so nasally. But you're right. Just like everything in life, you go to the gym to improve and change your body. Why wouldn't we do the same with recording ourselves? It just seems like such an unnatural act because speaking is so innate within us that it's like it's so weird to do that. But I can imagine that the upside of just simply watching yourself and having that little bit of awareness, like the upside of that is tremendous.
Yeah. And it's critical to think about it. I mean, this is the hard stuff as a business owner, right? What you have to think about is if you're the face of your business, you need to think about that role, treat it as a role of an employee, right? We want to bring our ego in. We want to be like, do people like us? Why do I look weird? Like we make it all very personal. But if we were to separate it for a second and say, if you were to hire a spokesperson in your organization, you would coach them. You would give them positive feedback. You would guide them. You wouldn't tear them apart in those ways because that won't be helpful to the brand. So what we really have to come back to is, what does the business need? When you are showing up on stages, and again, a stage could be virtual, it could be live, it could be a conversation. When you're showing up on stages, you need to be that person. But when you're coming back as the business owner, put on that hat and think about, how can I make it better? How can I help get the business what it needs? Better advocacy. And I think the best way to do that is by having stronger communication skills.
Right. And what I love about your framework, it's very similar to what I do too, is it's not about changing the person's story, right? We all have that innate within us. It's about just refiling the filing cabinet and reshuffling things so that it kind of makes sense in a certain order. And so you have a framework for that. That's beautiful. How can people find you and take the next step with you?
Yeah. Well, the best place to go if you're already a podcast listener is come hang out with my podcast, as I said, Hint of Hustle. And the whole concept of that show is, I believe that the time you spend on stage should give you more freedom and flexibility off stage. So I talk to entrepreneurs who have visible brands who are trying to get themselves out there more, but build a sustainable business in the background. So come hang out, Hint of Hustle. The best place to go to get some great free resources, including a few of the things I talked about today, is my website, heathersager.com. If you can go there, one of my favorite guides that people love to download. Remember earlier when I mentioned that the pitch at the end of a podcast interview, talk about meta right now, or at the end of a video, people are like, fumbly, what do I say? Well, one of the struggles that people have is that awkward transition. So they go long and fumbly. So if you have a freebie, or if you're doing any kind of media and you want to have a smoother transition into your stuff, you can grab one of my guides. It's called 19 Magnetic Phrases that you can use on podcasts, live video stages to send your ideal client running to your opt-ins. So you can grab that, and it teaches you, similar to what I just did, to seamlessly talk about your stuff and then guide people into action. So that's available at heathersager.com.
Ooh, girl, if I had $1 for every head nod I did in the last 30 minutes, I would have like thousands of dollars. So you definitely made that happen. You've got a head nod from me, and I'm sure you're going to get so many head nods from people listening. And I I'm so happy. We're going to have you back too on the
I would
show.
love to.
So.
I would love to. It's a gift. You have such an incredible audience. I know that you know this, and those of you listening, I know you know Gloria is amazing, but your heart is so big, and I am so grateful to have met you this year.
Me too. Well, thank you so, so much. And go ahead and listen to our podcast, Hint of Hustle. And you're on Instagram, right? At Heather Sager.
I am. At the Heather Sager.
Oh, the one and only.
I know the other one was taken and she doesn't use the account, but whatever. I just made myself a big deal by putting a "the" in the front.
You are a big deal. So I can vouch for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.